You think we should do an intro for these, or?
Yeah.
Welcome back to the Breadcast. I'm Luke Schuler.
I am Quintin Stevens.
And this is episode 3?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, wait.
Yeah.
This
was
3,
supposed to be 4. It's 3.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
It's fine.
It's fine. So today, I think, you know how we were talking about in American politics and policies, we were talking about that whole test, and we were saying how the political compass test is probably a lot more accurate.
Yeah.
I think we should take that right here.
Oh, hell yeah.
I think both of us.
Let's do it. Okay, I'll take it on mine.
We'll both take it on here.
Okay.
And
And we'll
then we can
discuss. Yeah, yep.
Discuss the question.
Because that 20 question one was just so stupid.
Right, yeah. It wasn't enough, and it was not enough options.
One of the questions was just simply, do you think homeless people have it tough or
Right.
easy?
Yeah, it's like,
well,
come on.
easy, obviously.
Yeah,
Duh.
and it's like every homeless person.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's homeless people out there that are totally just living life, you know?
They're just vibing.
I'd imagine
No
of them aren't.
taxes.
Most of them probably aren't doing too great, though.
No, physically.
Just,
their health.
Just in general, I think.
But if I were homeless, bro, I should not be talking. I feel like I would just go. I would
So
just get a tent
there's a
and get
lot-
stuff to
there's a lot
survive
of
and hunt in the wild.
So basically, I should go over. So there's 4 options for each question. It's always the same. It's either strongly disagree, agree, or strongly agree. So the first question: if economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations. So, from what I'm familiar with, economic globalization is just widespread world trade for the most part. It's so it's very globalized trade.
Yep.
From what I understand. I'd have to say I agree that it probably should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of
I agree.
said corporations. So we'll put agree for that one. I'd always support my country whether it was right or wrong. I strongly disagree
Yeah,
with that.
as do I. Because
Because that's just not true.
people think the United States is perfect, but
It's not.
we've done some pretty horrendous shit.
Yeah,
So
yeah. As have
numerous.
just about any country you can think of
Yeah.
has probably done some really bad shit at some point. No one chooses their country of birth, so it's foolish to be proud of. Now, this one, on the contrary, I would disagree with this one as well, because, I think being patriotic is still a very acceptable thing, you know?
But patriotism and blind support are two different
very
things.
different concepts. So I'm going to say disagree with this one. Our race has many superior qualities compared with other races.
What does it mean by our race?
Whatever the race is of the person taking the test. This one, we're treading on eggshells here. I think we're just gonna disagree
with
and
that.
move on without discussing that one. The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Having played the Modern Warfare games, I agree.
I'd have to
Not strongly agree, but
agree. From a
agree.
strategic standpoint, I'd have to agree there. So, military action that defies international law is sometimes justified.
It really depends on the circumstances.
Yeah. And so I'd say agree because I think it is sometimes. It's rare, but I think it is sometimes justified. And I'm also not super familiar with international law, so I don't know what the bounds of that is.
Yeah.
But, just looking at the current world situation with, NATO Article 5, for instance, if that, let's say, Russian forces accidentally launch a ballistic missile. Well, not a ballistic missile, but some kind of, anti-tank missile or something like that, something along those lines, into a Polish field by accident. Technically, that being considered an act of war, that would mean that every NATO country would classifiably probably be at war with Russia at that point, and that's just a really bad situation.
Yeah, that is.
So I think that that's definitely sometimes justified.
Mm-hmm.
There is now a worrying fusion of information and entertainment. I would strongly agree
Yeah.
because I think it is really kind of dangerous that you have these companies and organizations and such that are supposed to be providing factual information, and they're looking more for what's going to please the public than
Exactly.
what's the truth. It's loading the next page. I think the Wi-Fi is kind of slow today.
It is.
Or maybe my computer's just slow. Sometimes it is slow when it hasn't ran in a while. Okay. People are ultimately divided more by class than by nationality. I would say so.
Yeah.
Especially in places like Europe,
Yeah.
where you don't necessarily have a ton of division by country lines
Yep.
among the actual people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's definitely more so by class. Controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment.
Oh, that's kind of a toughie.
Yeah.
Because they're both, I mean...
Those are both big issues. I mean, those are both very important to attempt to control pretty much at all costs.
I mean,
But
I feel like controlling unemployment is
that's
slightly
probably
more
yeah.
important.
So I would say disagree with that one. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment, they require regulation. I'd agree.
Yeah. Not strongly.
No, not strongly, not by any means, but yeah, they should probably have some.
Because if you look at...
And they do.
They do.
From each according to his ability to each according to his need is a fundamentally good idea. From each according to his ability to each according to his need. I know there's implications with this that I don't agree with, but this in of itself, completely standing alone, I think is a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, this means that, like, individuals who are good at a certain skill should perform that skill, and that, yeah, to each according to his need. So that's fairly self-explanatory. So I'd agree with that one. The freer the market, the freer the people. Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah, me as well.
That's pretty simple. It's a sad reflection on our society that something as basic as drinking water is now a bottled, branded consumer product.
No, I don't.
You don't think that's a sad reflection on our society?
No.
Something as basic as drinking water.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's sad that someone has created a brand and it's highly accessible to everyone.
I guess. It is kind of like, that's a tough one.
That is. Because that's a basic need. And
Right.
people are using it for money, but that's also food, goods, basically, you know?
Yeah, that's a lot of, it's hard to draw a line there.
Yeah.
It really is.
If there was like a no preference one, I think.
Yeah.
Right. You know.
Right. There's no neutral option on any of these. That's the only fallacy, I think, in these.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that one's really tough because I guess I'd say disagree, but I mean, that's still, I wish there were a neutral option for that one. Land shouldn't be a commodity to be bought and sold. I strongly disagree with this because I think that certain land should, yes, be set aside for public use, and it is, obviously. We have national and state parks and, you know, thousands upon thousands of square miles of public land. But the fact that it shouldn't be bought and sold or managed privately is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
I think that notion is completely obnoxious.
Because that includes like even private, like a 1 acre lot for a house. That should be able to be private. You shouldn't. Yeah.
Absolutely. It is regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to their society. You know what? I think that if you can manage to make a living off of doing just about nothing, if you're smart enough to do that, then all the power to you.
Yeah, good
so
for you.
I disagree with that one. Protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade. I'm going to look up the definition of protectionism.
Okay.
The theory or practice of shielding a country's domestic industries from foreign competition by taxing imports.
Okay.
I'd say sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
Rarely, very rarely, but I'd have to agree that it
Mhm.
is sometimes necessary. The only social responsibility of a company should be to deliver a profit to its shareholders.
Mm,
I'm not really sure on that one
yeah.
because, like, no, I think a company should probably have more responsibilities than that.
Than
solely.
just that
Yeah.
socially, like.
I would disagree. The rich are too highly taxed. How taxed are the rich?
Isn't it like 15%?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either.
Wealth tax bracket.
I think it's over 200,000. And
Billionaires pay an average federal individual income tax rate of just 8.2%. So I'd say I disagree.
Yeah.
I don't think the rich are too highly taxed.
No.
It's like, come on, you know. Those with the ability to pay should have access to higher standards of medical care. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Because, like, I'd agree with this because if you look at there's some kind of, like, very expensive surgery. Like,
Yeah.
some
Like
sort
more
of-
advanced
Yeah.
technology and more advanced surgeries
This-
require more.
If we were to
funding.
disagree with this, like, that's, you know, let's say you're an incredibly rich person and I don't know, some organ in your body is like failing, like your heart or something like that, and you can afford whatever, you know, fee it is to get an operation that will fix that, but you're not allowed to because poor people can't afford it. I think that's a ridiculous concept. That may seem a bit harsh, but that's just what I think. So I'm going to not strongly agree with that one, but I will agree with it. Governments should penalize businesses that mislead the public. Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with
Yeah,
that.
I would also agree.
Yeah, that's...
Like, if
that's
you look
fair,
at the amount of fake news
Oh, yeah,
nowadays,
or
it's just
false
ridiculous.
advertisement. I mean, that's
I know
pretty-
it's freedom of speech, but that is kind of, there has to be a line drawn somewhere.
Right. It's just tough to know where. A genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of predator multinationals to create monopolies. I guess I'd agree. Because then
smaller companies
then you're just
would not be
screwed,
able
and
to
then
compete.
it's not really a
A
free market.
Yeah.
All right. Next page is let me have a bit of a drink here. Yeah, I think this is a lot more like accurate than what he had us take.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Abortion, when the woman's life is not threatened, should always be illegal.
I think in certain case scenarios, like, of course, rape.
Right.
If someone gets pregnant off of
think-
rape, they should definitely be able to make that
I
decision.
think the fact that this does not cover rape and incest, I think we should disagree with this one.
Yeah.
Now, if there was a caveat here that said abortion when a woman's life is not threatened should always be illegal, you know, and when rape and incest aren't the case, that would be a little more acceptable, but I would definitely disagree there, without question. So all authority should be questioned. I would disagree, because I feel like a lot of authority should be questioned, if not most, depending on the scenario, but I don't think you should question all authority.
Yeah.
Like, you know, if you're in a classroom, you're not like,
And your teacher.
who put you in charge?
Yeah,
You know?
right. Some figures, of course, do
Right.
need to be,
Yeah.
but yeah, on a smaller scale, definitely no.
An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, that's just
I mean,
principle of fair.
I mean, if you murder someone,
You ought to have an equal consequence.
Yeah.
That's just
take a
that's
life,
very simple.
give yours.
Taxpayers should not be expected to prop up any theaters or museums that cannot survive on a commercial basis. I don't like
See,
that
how is like
theaters and museums are grouped together here, because theaters are very different than
yeah.
museums are preservation of history and theaters are for entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to agree though, because I think that taxpayers themselves should not be directly
responsible for things
at
that
least
won't be successful.
not directly.
Yeah.
And obviously that depends on the scenario too, you
Mhm.
know. So we'll say agree there. Schools should not make classroom attendance compulsory. I would strongly disagree, because I think it should absolutely be. I mean, everybody should at least get some sort of education. You know? You shouldn't be walking around
Without
a third grade reading level or
Exactly.
something, you know. All people have their rights, but it is better for all of us that different sorts of people should keep to their own kind. I would
Wow.
definitely disagree.
Yeah, jeez.
That's a little, yeah, right. That's interesting. Good parents sometimes have to spank their children. I would agree.
Yeah, I mean, it happened to me as a kid.
That's a
when I was-
touchy subject for a lot of people, but I think childhood discipline is something that's faltering as a concept, and we're seeing the result play out.
Newer generations are more soft.
Yeah, and they don't have
It's
the
not like it's
concept of discipline.
Child
And I'm
abuse
sure-
either.
I'm
I
sure
mean, there's
that's
a difference between hitting your kid
Right.
and spanking them.
It should never be out of anger.
No,
Um,
it should be out of trying to teach them, a moral lesson.
Yeah. It's natural for children to keep some secrets from their parents. I'd agree.
Yeah, definitely.
This is obviously these two are pretty conflicting,
Mm-hmm.
but I think, I think it's natural for, like, there's some things that your parents don't have to know about,
Yeah, definitely.
Possessing marijuana for personal use should not be a criminal offense. I don't really know.
I don't really have an opinion. Personally, I've never gotten involved with that, so it's like.
I don't know a lot about that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I guess
I say
I'd
for now, just because it is a
I'd
drug.
put disagree. Yeah.
I mean,
because that's-
medical purposes, I totally understand, but just
Yeah. At the end of the day, it is a drug. So, granted, we allow alcohol, but that's.
Mhm.
I don't think there's enough regulation on that at this point to just outright. Anyway, the prime function of schooling should be to equip the future generation to find jobs. I strongly agree.
Yep.
Because that's really
Not
what it
only
ought
that,
to
but
be.
just how to
Right.
pay
How
your
to-
taxes and
yeah.
how to do
live on your own.
finances.
Yeah, how to live independently.
Yeah.
Really. People with serious inheritable disabilities should not be allowed to reproduce. I'm
What
gonna
the
have to
hell?
disagree. I'm gonna have to disagree
Yeah.
with that one. That's a little bit. That's
It's a little harsh.
some of
man.
these are a little not great. The most important thing for children to learn is to accept discipline.
See, I wouldn't say it's
disagree.
It's definitely not the
It's
most
important.
important.
It's not the most
important, but it is important.
I think the most important thing for children to learn is to function as a member of society.
And how
that
to
is
learn
not
how
necessarily to
to
accept discipline.
own up to their mistakes and
Right,
learn
to
from
have
them.
integrity.
Yeah.
And I think that it's good to accept discipline, but not always, because
It is
sometimes
not the
there's
most
there's
important
a
thing.
bit of an overstepping by the establishment that
Yeah.
ought not to be tolerated. There are no savage and civilized peoples. There are only different cultures. I'd have to disagree, because I think there are savage and
There
civilized
are.
people. That's just my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
If that has any implications that are offensive, then I apologize, but that's just the way I feel. Those who are able to work and refuse the opportunity should not expect society's support. I think there's a difference between not being able to work and being
just
able to
simply
work.
being lazy.
Right.
So I agree with
Yeah.
that statement.
I would absolutely agree. When you are troubled, it's better not to think about it, but to keep busy with more cheerful things. I disagree.
I disagree as well.
Because I think it's one thing to not dwell on your issues,
And
But
it's one
it's
thing to just
another-
ignore them.
yeah.
I mean, you have to identify your issue
Right.
if you want it to get better.
Yeah, you have to transcend that.
Mm-hmm.
First generation immigrants can never be fully integrated within their new country.
I disagree.
Yeah,
I
I
mean-
think that's very possible.
Mhm.
I think you can definitely accomplish that. What's good for the most successful corporations is always ultimately good for us. I
Disagree.
I absolutely disagree.
Maybe even,
It's-
I think strongly disagree.
You think so?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you there because that's not.
Not even the slightest. No. It's,
No broadcasting institution, however independent its content, should receive public funding. I'd have to agree with that because it doesn't matter that much. I guess the only slight exception to that, I would say, is like maybe like the emergency broadcast system. That's just for informing people of, threats to their well-being.
yeah. It should not be public funding.
Right.
Yeah, not
But
by
that's- yeah.
taxpayers. And
Not directly, anyways.
No. It's like us.
Right. That's
We
true.
expect
yeah.
to get
What
paid
if
by
we-
the public for
yeah,
this bullshit.
You guys are getting like a tax on your what's something really obscure that we can tax them on?
I don't know.
Windshield wiper fluid.
Yes.
Every time you buy windshield wiper fluid, there's an extra 1% tax on that. It goes straight into our pockets.
True. I mean, what?
That'd be cool.
That would be. Not.
Our civil liberties are being excessively curbed in the name of counterterrorism. I'm not sure.
I don't think so. I mean, look at TSA. That is technically preventing terroristic
the thing that
acts.
The thing that I think about here is airport security.
Definitely.
And stuff
I mean,
like that.
that's
and,
not
like,
taking away
concealed
civil.
carry.
If anything, that makes me feel better.
Yeah, I'd have to disagree with this
Yeah.
one. A significant advantage, oh boy, I like this one.
Mm-hmm.
A significant advantage of a one-party state is that it avoids all the arguments that delay progress in a democratic political system. I gotta strongly disagree with this.
Yeah,
one.
me as well.
That's just not, that's not an advantage.
I mean, look in California. Like, there's one from.
Look at the Soviet Union. Although the electronic age makes official surveillance easier, only wrongdoers need to be worried. I disagree. I think everybody should be worried because that's a little bit wacky for you to be watched
Yeah,
in any way by an establishment that is more powerful than you.
strongly agree.
The death penalty should be an option for the most serious crimes. I'd agree.
Yep.
Because the most serious crimes, I'm thinking like really just awful.
Yeah.
Awful stuff. Like very rarely
Mm-hmm.
does that kind of stuff happen, but I think that when it does, and obviously that's up to the courts to decide, but I think that should be an option. In a civilized society, one must always have people above to be obeyed and people below to be commanded. I would disagree.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can have a society where you're pretty much equal with everybody, but I don't think that's necessarily the most advantageous.
No.
But I think that also, I don't know. Abstract art that doesn't represent anything shouldn't be considered art at all.
Well, I mean, like some of the new art, like that you see on the college campus, it's just like metal shapes.
Yeah, I don't.
Like, what the hell?
Let's look up the definition of art right now.
When I think of art, I think of Vincent van Gogh and some of the bigger.
The expression or application of human creative skill and imagination, typically in a visual form. So yeah, I would not consider that art. I'd consider it an object that can be sometimes appealing to look at.
Yeah,
I wouldn't call it art.
Definitely not art.
So I'd agree with this one.
Mm-hmm.
In criminal justice, punishment should be more important than rehabilitation.
No, there was that one.
I would disagree.
There was that one thing I saw.
I would disagree. I think rehabilitation, in most cases, is more important.
It's like, I don't know if it's like Finland, but they don't send people to like a traditional prison. It's more of a rehabilitation
I think it was
thing.
Norway.
Norway, yeah.
I know it was one of those very progressive Scandinavian countries.
But and it works. Their
Right,
crime
it
rates are
does.
so
Yeah.
much lower because of
Um,
it. Or they're basically relapse crimes
Yeah,
are so much lower.
right. And that can't work for everybody, but it's one thing to just, you know,
Lock someone up for
yeah. Like, you can't just really take somebody and lock them up and ignore them and then just,
Expect
assume
them to
that
get
they're just
better.
going to, like, do better,
Yeah.
as an individual in society. It is a waste of time to try to rehabilitate some criminals. I'd have to agree, because some of them are kind of past the
They're
point.
gone, yeah.
Like we were discussing earlier, with the death penalty, some of them are just past that point where they can be expected to re-enter society.
I mean,
as a
it's one thing of
functioning
like drug
individual.
use.
Yeah.
Definitely rehabilitation.
That's-
But
oh, yeah.
murder is no.
That's like, come on.
That's terrible.
Depending on the type of murder, of course, The business person and the manufacturer are more important than the writer and the artist. I would strongly agree. Because that's just, I think, the way it is.
There's one thing thinking of an idea, and there's another thing following through
Yeah.
with it and planning and
Right, and actually doing something very actively that's going to have an effect.
an idea
on
without,
society positively.
there's like a quote that's like an idea without acting upon it is, I don't exactly remember how it goes, but you kind of get the gist.
I think I've seen that
Yeah.
one before. Mothers may have careers, but their first duty is to be homemakers. This one's
Oh, God.
a little risky. This is tough.
I don't think we should decide they can do what they want.
Yeah,
So
I
I'd
guess,
say
I guess
disagree.
we'll disagree with this
Like,
one.
It's kind of
There can be an argument made for some other things, but
Yeah.
I don't think we should discuss that.
No.
Multinational companies are unethically exploiting the plant genetic resources of developing countries. Yeah, look at like Nestle.
Yeah.
Some of the shit they're doing is just awful.
Mhm.
So I'd agree with that.
And Nike.
Yeah, just pretty much
Sweatshops.
any of them. Some of them are just better at keeping it secret than others.
Yeah, true.
Making peace with the establishment is an important aspect of maturity. I don't think so. I think that making peace with the establishment kind of makes you let your guard down, and that's not really what democracy is about. you
Yeah.
know? This one takes a long time.
It does.
Like if we
5
tried
of
to
6.
take this
5 of 6.
in one class period, I think it would.
Strongly
like a whole-
disagree.
Astrology
Strong-
accurately
Strongly
explains many
disagree.
things. Strongly disagree.
It doesn't do shit.
You cannot be moral without being religious. I would disagree because I
Mhm.
think there are plenty of people that are not religious that are moral,
Yeah.
even by religious standards.
Mhm.
Charity is better than social security as a means of helping the genuinely disadvantaged. I'm not super familiar with like what social security really does.
Yeah.
So I'd have to agree with this one because charity is very subjective to individual demographics,
Mhm.
whereas social security is more widespread from what I know, although I'm not super knowledgeable on
Yeah.
that. Some people are naturally unlucky. I think luck is a made-up concept, so I'd have to disagree. I don't think luck is real. I guess you can be lucky, but like that's just you have
Coincidence.
to take advantage of the probabilities
Mhm.
at that given moment. It is important that my child's school instills religious values. I think even as a religious person, I would disagree because that's kind of stuff should probably be taught at home.
Freedom of
anyways.
religion. I mean,
Yeah,
you
that's-
can't. No.
You shouldn't be pushing that on others,
No.
regardless. So yeah. And I think even very religious people would agree with us
Yeah.
there, that like that's better to be taught at home.
Mhm.
You don't want the establishment teaching your kids that.
No.
You want it to be taught by you, probably. Sex outside marriage is usually immoral. I don't know.
This is a loaded question.
Yeah, that's
I mean, From like, okay, I would have to
Careful.
disagree here. But then again, I would also have to agree. It's a tough question.
Let's move on.
Yeah, we're not gonna.
A same-sex couple in a stable, loving relationship should not be excluded from the possibility of child adoption.
I think they should.
They should be able to.
They
or
should be able
shouldn't?
to.
Or they should
yeah.
be excluded.
I mean,
yeah, I'd
because
agree.
one, that you're creating a family for the child, which I think is the most important thing. Not
Right.
if this couple can
This-
adopt. It doesn't
yeah.
matter. It's about the
This
child.
This child is obviously, they're either pretty much going to grow up without guardians, or they're going to grow up with ones that are of the same sex, and I don't think that's necessarily always a super bad situation, regardless of what your views on that. Pornography depicting consenting adults should be legal for the adult population.
See, I
I'm
don't.
against that practice, but I would have to agree because people rely on that, and if you make it illegal, it's going to become a thing like we have with drugs. And a lot of times when people can't access this, they do very desperate things.
Yeah.
And that's how you end up with predatory behavior.
Yeah, like you said, personally, I don't. No, I
Right,
think it's
that's-
morally wrong,
yeah.
but I don't.
In an
think it
ideal
should be
world,
illegal.
In an ideal world, I would disagree with that.
I mean, if it
That's
had
not
never
what we
came
have.
to be in the first place,
Right.
then it
That
wouldn't
would
be an
preferable,
issue.
But that's kind of been going on since the beginning of time. I think.
Yeah.
So, what goes on in a private bedroom between consenting adults is no business of the state. I'd have to agree.
As well as I, yeah.
No one can feel naturally homosexual. I would disagree. I think that
Mhm.
people can very much feel that.
Mhm.
These days, openness about sex has gone too far.
I'd agree. Yeah.
I would agree.
There are
because
some
that's-
people who just
it's a little.
keep it
I don't
private,
know.
please.
Yeah, it's like I don't really want to know about that.
Mhm.
You know. All right, we'll see our results here in a moment. So.
Was that the last page?
Yeah, that was it. So basically, the way this political compass test works is there's like these 4 quadrants, right? It's like, in math class, right? You get the 4 quadrants. And the closer you are to the center, the more balanced you are. The up and down axis is like freedom versus security type thing, security being on top and freedom being on the bottom. And then left and right is left and right politically,
Yep.
So
And
Democrat versus Republican,
which was interesting
conservative
was
versus liberal.
our classroom when we took it, we got all basically right down the middle.
And that's not
more people were.
That's not exactly the same grid, but it's very similar.
Yeah, quite.
To an extent. Okay, so
I'm
we'll
thinking
scroll
we're
through.
going to get.
Okay, so yeah, we are like 1 unit down, and like half a unit to the left.
That's
from the
exactly
center.
where I got when I took the.
Right,
APP
and that's
one.
a pretty similar test. I was more like
I'll
down
take a
here,
picture
but
quick and then we can.
so yeah.
That's where I was expecting to be, basically right in the middle.
Yeah.
Moderation.
Yeah, I mean, that's really, I think that that's the place to be nowadays.
Mhm.
Now more than ever, especially in America, because we're so polarized. And I think that you're going to start to see the Republicans and Democrats start to pull towards the middle, because otherwise they're going to suffer as a result.
Mhm.
Because there's a gap there. And that gap will continue to increase. And if those two parties aren't careful, I mean, we could start to see a rise in third-party politics,
Yeah.
which I would honestly love to see. But
Yeah.
I don't think that'll happen.
No.
I think they'll successfully adjust, which is unfortunate, but
Mhm.
that's just the way it is most of the time. So, yeah, I mean, I think centrism is honestly the fundamentally correct practice. To be unbiased politically is just the way to go, I
Mhm.
think. I don't know how anybody can really be far right or far left.
No.
It just doesn't make sense. To be that colluded in your thought process is just, I think, very dangerous.
I mean, without the media, you'll come to see that about 90%, 90 to 98% of the people agree on most of these topics.
Right, yeah.
See, like we said, the majority of our class was right, basically smack
Right.
dab in the middle, up and down. More people were
Yeah.
more for security, more for freedom, but no one was really too far right or too far left.
Yeah.
And if the media didn't get involved and people could just have a discussion
Yeah.
together, they'd
People
figure
are-
that out really fast.
People are forced to try and pick a side or have their opinion not matter.
Exactly.
And that's the problem with
Cancel culture.
cancel culture and the two-party system and just the
Mhm.
way the world is politically,
Mhm.
or at least the United States, because you've got a lot of European and other countries that they're very widespread. As far as political parties, they'll have 7 different representative groups in parliament or whatever from
Mhm.
the different parties, which is nice.
Yeah.
I don't know that will ever happen here. I don't know if it'll ever be allowed to, because since practically the beginning of this country, we've had 2 opposing sides, and that's how it's always been,
Mhm.
pretty much. And I think some of the founding fathers foresaw and tried to prevent that, and it didn't really work, which is unfortunate, but it could be worse. But it could also be a hell of a lot better. So,
Agreed.
yeah.
All right, we're gonna end it there. I think.
Yeah, I think that's fair. We'll catch you guys on the flip side.